the main presentation. So we'll present to you products and patients, the essential role of PMs in life sciences. Rose Cook. And Rose will be speaking here shortly. I will read her bio. As a graduate of Rutgers University College of Engineering with a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering and is a certified project manager professional. Prior to FlexPro, she led various technical managerial positions in large corporations, including Johnson & Johnson, Colgate Palmolive, thank you, and Nabisco. And I'd like to introduce you to Rose Cook. By the way, Rose, I'm a Rutgers graduate too.
Hey, are you rah-rah? There
exactly, you go. Exactly. All right, I will turn over the prezo. I will stop sharing.
Okay.
And I think you are set up as a host or co-host, and you can begin sharing at your leisure.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, so here I go. Give me a second to start the presentation. Give it a second. Okay. First of all, thank you to Drew and Frank and the PMI team for having me here and the FlexPro team to talk about this topic that we're all very, very passionate about. Drew, you okay? Can you see the slides? Okay, you're muted, but I think you said yes. Okay.
I did. Yes, I did. They look great. Nice and sharp. Yep.
Great. And I think what Drew had mentioned before is we're going to do a little bit of a presentation in the beginning, and then we're going to move into the panel discussion. And especially in the panel discussion, if you could pop your questions into the chat, it'll make it a more robust session when we go into the discussion. But what I'm going to do is start a little bit high level because there's a big mix of backgrounds that are here. Some deeper in life sciences, but some that have never worked in it. So we're going to stay pretty high level. We're going to talk about this topic that's near and dear to our hearts. But before we do that, just a little bit about me. I'm Chief Executive Officer of FlexPro since 2008. So we've been in business for about 13 years. And I went and got my PMP and made it official, even though I've been PMing all my life, in 2017. I highly recommend it. We have a PMP challenge group going on in our own company right now with several people studying together for the new exam. So highly recommend it if you haven't done that already. I've been involved in activities as exhibitor and speaker, as you can see here. Happy to be back again. Looking forward to being live at Villanova at some point soon. I've had 20 years of large global company experience in project management, drug and device development, engineering, and manufacturing operations, the majority of it at Johnson & Johnson. So that's a lot of my background. And my background is in engineering from Rutgers University. So the picture down here on the lower right is actually myself in the red, and that's my identical twin sister, Lynn, on the right. So we're both Rutgers engineering grads. And Lynn tonight is actually at a corporate advisory board meeting for PMI New Jersey. So we're active in the region, and please, check us out online. And then a little bit more about the company. FlexPro is a project management consulting firm. We're focused only on life sciences. So we're concentrated in pharmaceutical, which includes what is called OTC or over the counter, also biotechnology and medical device. And our headquarters is in Greater Philadelphia, and we have a satellite office in New Jersey. And of course, these days, we're servicing clients virtually throughout the US. So it doesn't even matter where the clients are. And our focus, the majority of our focus is in the areas of drug development and supply chain within life sciences. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And then we're proud to say on the bottom right there that we've been voted best places to work in the Greater Philadelphia area. So we're pretty proud of that. So check us out if you get a chance. Okay. The other news with our company is that FlexPro has been recently acquired by Network Partners. This was 2 weeks ago. They're a high growth professional service firm also in the life sciences. So we're pretty excited about this partnership. That was an acquisition that happened 2 weeks ago. And what that means is we're going to be able to build upon our project management consulting strength, and we'll be able to add other service areas such as regulatory, quality, package engineering, and that type of service. So we're pretty excited about that coming next. Okay. All right, so tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about the essential role of project management and talk about PM as we weave it through some of these technical topics. And then in terms of life sciences, I'm going to go into the drug development process at a fairly high level, but it'll give you a good sense of the steps if you're not familiar with this industry, the steps to get this drug developed and ultimately launched and marketed to patients. We'll also talk about pharmaceutical supply chain. What are the pieces, the typical parts of the pharmaceutical supply chain? I'll share some of the industry players in the area. And then finally, we always need to remember the focus is the patients that we serve in this industry. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then we'll go into a panel with a question and answer and a discussion about the challenges in drug development and supply chain. And I'll bring in my colleagues, Linda Brajdic and Jose Aguayo. We're going to talk about those challenges, including those that you've been hearing in the news related to COVID-19, which I think has put the spotlight on the industry, more so than ever before. And then we'll close with talking about careers in life sciences PM. So if you either are in it now or you want to find a way to bridge from another industry or another functional area, we can have a discussion there. We'll put some ideas out there for you to think about. Okay. All right. So life sciences. What is life sciences? Anyway, I talked to you about it and I said it's pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical devices, but I kind of like this definition that was given by Chris Molyneux, who's CEO of Life Sciences Pennsylvania, which is a trade organization for life sciences. Feel free to check them out if you want to learn more about the industry too, lifesciencespa.org. He defines life sciences as a diverse group of organizations, industries, and activities with one common link. They apply knowledge of the way in which living organisms, chemicals, and technology function for the betterment of the human condition. I love that because it just really speaks to the value that the industry brings. So mull over that for a minute. Okay. So the essential role of project management. Why in life sciences is it so essential? On the right, I just threw on there on the picture, complex. The development of drugs and the movement of drugs through the supply chain is a very, very complex process, right? It has many, many work streams. So PM gives the teams, the projects, the structural backbone to be able to execute on these very complex projects. I mean, communication, of course, we all say is absolutely critical, especially when there's multiple work streams and many, many functions to coordinate. Cross-functional leadership is key because there are so many functions. There is a lot of highly matrixed groups and reporting relationships, which are very complicated, especially in large global pharma organizations. So those skills are absolutely needed. External partner relationship. In the pharmaceutical industry, it's not all done in-house. There's external partners for clinical trials, for manufacturing, and lots of other things. So you need to be able to manage external partners too. Stakeholder management is tied into what I said before, is that there's just so many stakeholders. and you have to be very skilled at managing them, up, down, around, very critical. And then the last three here are typical, I think you would hear in any project management organization, right? You need to be able to do risk planning and work on mitigation strategies. There's of course timelines, budgets, and resources, like there always is for every project, and then metrics and reporting. So those are a bit more standard. But we'll talk a little bit more about these as we weave them into the discussion as we move forward. Okay. All right. So the next two slides, I'm going to talk about the drug development process, right? I'm going to do the first three steps here, and then the next two on the next slide. So it's a little bit busy, but I wanted to show you high level what it takes to develop a drug. So step one, right here on the top, is research for a new drug starts in the laboratory. So you always hear about scientists working in the laboratory, you know, in discovery. You hear drug discovery, drug development. So the work first starts in the laboratory to be able to find something that's a viable candidate for a drug. And then the second step, called here pre-clinical research, is that the drugs then undergo laboratory and animal testing in some cases. And what we're doing here in preclinical is that we're trying to answer questions about safety, right? How safe is that drug? And that's a very important step, right? Because the next step, which is step 3, is when you go into clinical research, that's when you're putting drugs and product in humans, in people. So there's like a big bar between step 2 and 3 where you have to get approval, and you need to make sure that this drug is safe enough before you're even going to start clinical trials in people, right? So step 3, clinical research, is generalized here, and it's like one step, but that's really extensive and very expensive, right? So you'll hear in the news about phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and what it is that you're moving through approvals in a stepwise fashion to be able to prove that the drug is first off safe and second off effective. So what you're doing is you're moving through smaller amounts of patients. Often you start with healthy patients, and then you move through larger groups of people as you're going from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So we can, Linda has particular expertise in clinical research, so we can talk to her in detail when we go into the panel. Okay, step 4, FDA review. So this is FDA because this is, the example here is for a US product. There's other health authorities that might be in other countries, right? But here, what step 4 is, it's about the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, taking all of the data that's been submitted from your preclinical and your clinical trials. It's related to the drug or device, depending on what it is you're getting approved. And they have an advisory committee. They're basically looking to see whether they're going to approve this for market or for use, right? So that's a very, very big step as well, is the FDA review. And you've seen some of that's been expedited in terms of the vaccines, for instance. And then the final step here on step 5 is called post-market safety monitoring. And what this is, and we should feel good about this, is that FDA monitors all of the products after they're available for use by the public, right? So that, because the trials are often, you know, thousands or tens of thousands of people, and once a drug gets out to millions and millions, there are things that you might discover over time. So there is this post-market safety monitoring. Some of you may remember, it was probably a while ago, I'm dating myself, but Merck had a product called Vioxx. I believe it was a painkiller. And then what happened over time is that it just was discovered that it was producing heart attacks or strokes, right? There was that side effect that after having been released to millions of people, they were seeing this trend, and they ended up actually taking it off the market. So that's an example of where this post-market safety monitoring is really helping to keep us safe. Okay. All righty. All right, so now I'm going to talk about getting products to the patient. So this is an intro and a high-level view of the pharmaceutical supply chain. So you'll see a graphic here, and it's a simple one, but it's essentially showing from left to right that the parties involved are, when you're making a drug, there is a manufacturer, then there's a wholesaler, and then it goes to a pharmacy before it finally goes out to the patients. So that's like high level what the path looks like. And the work that we do at FlexPro with our clients is really focused on the manufacturer piece. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what happens at the manufacturer. So here, this is a pictorial about the pharmaceutical supply chain. So sometimes people say, well, what is supply chain anyway? What does that term mean, supply chain? So I like to explain it as plan, buy, make, deliver. Right? So that's represented here. Plan would mean supply chain planning. How much of this product do you need? How much has sales predicted that the forecast is going to be? And then you need to plan how you're going to get all those materials together and how much. So that's the plan phase. And I'm oversimplifying this a little bit, but this is just for illustration. The second step would be buy. So you hear about sourcing and procurement groups within large pharmaceutical companies, right? This would be purchasing the chemicals that make up the drugs. It would be purchasing the packaging. It could even be purchasing, other materials, supporting materials that go with marketing the drug. Make. So make, to me, make is manufacture, is the way I like to think about it. So we use the operations gear here to show make is manufacturing the drug. And a lot of times people think this is always done inside a large pharma company, but a lot of times this is contracted out to a third party to be made. So that's where I talked about that external partner management on why PM is so essential. Often the manufacture of a drug is actually done at a third party, even though the responsibility for the making of that product still lies in the hands of the pharma company. And then finally, the last step is deliver. And deliver is focused on the logistics and the distribution. And how do you get this finished drug product out safely out to patients? We've been hearing a lot with the vaccine about cold storage, right? So you might hear about terms like cold chain. I think it was the Pfizer product had to be in ultra low temperatures. So there are packaging, cold chain, logistics professionals that all they do is really figure out how to safely get this product from the manufacturer all the way through to the patient. So in essence, that's high level, the pharmaceutical supply chain. And then I just included this here because you can't talk about supply chain without somebody saying the word blockchain. And I'm not going to be claiming to be an expert in blockchain by any means, but the the term blockchain is essentially something that you're starting to hear when you're talking about the supply chain of tomorrow. And essentially it's blocks of data, if you will, that are joined together, and none of the pieces are owned by any single entity. And the beauty of blockchain is that you're talking about real-time data transparency. And in the case of supply chain, you would know where the data, and then you could like locate where your product is. And there's no way to tamper with the data. So that's, you know, in the future. Some companies are working on it now, but if you hear the term blockchain, that's generally the idea. Okay, life sciences major players in the area. There are many of them, but I listed here, we work with many of these in the New Jersey and Philadelphia areas. These are some of the big names that you'll see. But in addition to these, pay attention if you're interested in working in the industry there are a lot of small to mid-size emerging companies, many of them in the biotech space. And it could be a very innovative place to work. Often, you know, they come out of academia or a lab type of environment where the drug was discovered and developed, and they really could use our PM skills, right, to be able to bring these drugs to market. So this gives you an idea of some of the players. Okay, and then as I said earlier, we never want to forget about the patients that we serve. And we did an exercise a year or so ago at FlexPro where we took our projects and we said, what are the types of therapeutic areas and disease states that we're helping? So I'm just popping them on the screen here, all different types of areas that we've been able to help patients, and they continue to grow. And this is a lot of the reason why we love to work in this industry, because you're always feeling like you're making an impact. And I just put up there cancer. There's been a lot of work in cancer and oncology. Our work is not done yet, obviously. Almost everybody has been impacted by cancer and their families and friends in some way. And then of course, this past year, COVID-19. So there's a lot of work around not only the vaccines, but the drugs and therapeutics to be able to treat the disease so that it's not so severe. And we're certainly working on some of those projects. And we're happy to be involved in those kind of efforts. Okay, and like I said, project managers make a difference in patients' lives. I just want to show you the happy group. This is us, but sadly, we haven't gotten together as a group like this since 2019. So no, this isn't us breaking all the social distancing rules. This is us from over a year ago. So I just wanted to show you the group. Okay, so that's the presentation piece. I want to move into introducing our panelists, and then we're going to take some of the chat questions and really get into it there. So thanks for your patience on the intro. I'm going to introduce our panelists. I have Linda Brajdic and Jose Aguayo. Linda, you want to introduce yourself and just say a few words about your background?
Sure. Very happy to be here. I started my career as a medical technologist, so that's my training. Started working in a hospital laboratory, and I made the transition to pharma by doing stability testing in their analytical lab. So while I was there, I learned about drug development. I had no idea this whole process, what it was. So I learned about the drug development and the clinical stages, and I was very interested. So I went into clinical research and spent the bulk of time there. And then I've been in overall project management about 20 years now. And I've worked at many companies, small ones, large ones. My longest tenure was at Janssen Pharmaceuticals, and that was 17 years. And now I've been with FlexPro 6 months. very happy to be there. And my current client is a very small company. There's 30 people. And my focus right now is on clinical trials, very specifically on 4 different studies. And one of them is for COVID. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And then, so Linda could definitely answer some of the deeper questions around clinical trials and drug development in general. So we'll get into those in a minute. Jose.
Hey there, my name is Jose Aguayo. I started my career in pharma, doing planning, and I've been in different roles, supply chain roles throughout my whole career. So if we reimagine that slide that Rose just put up, I've been in every one of those spaces in one capacity or the other. You know, supply chain manager, logistics manager, inventory manager, and I've been in different industries. I've been in the pharma industry with J&J was about 10 years. I was in the medical device industry, 2 different types of medical device. One were the large ones like Siemens Medical, and then smaller ones like trauma and spine. That was like the Synthes organization. And then I also did some work in the consumer, and in somewhere around 2008, you know, I had a lot of interest in project management, and that was at Wyeth Pharmaceutical, and we created a PMO with a team that I worked with, and from there on, I basically led projects, and I enjoyed doing so.
Great. Thanks, Jose. So obviously he's the deep expert in supply chain, plan, buy, make, deliver. So we can direct any specific supply chain questions over to him. Great. So what I'm going to do is I have a couple of tickler questions to get us started. Really would love to, you know, hear from the audience so we can get some good conversation going here. And let me see what I have here as the first one. Okay, so food for thought. If the drug development process is so complex, how are the manufacturers able to get COVID-19 vaccines developed and approved so quickly? So that's got an element of drug development and then also supply chain. So we start with Linda. You could talk about the drug development.
Okay, the drug development piece, if you remember when Rose showed her overview, there were different phases in drug development. And phase 1, you look for safety primarily, and it's in healthy volunteers. Once you see that it's safe, you would go to phase 2. Phase 2, you would be looking at your actual disease that you want to treat, and you would do a dose ranging study. You would have more patients and you'd pick your optimal dose, looking at safety and efficacy. After that, you would go into your phase 3, which are huge studies, and they can be tens of thousands of patients. So what they did with the vaccine development is, instead of being sequential, they did these things in parallel. So they saved a lot of time. They didn't have to go through each stage gate to get to the next development phase. So that shaved off a lot of drug development time. And Jose, I think you can speak to the manufacturing piece, how they sped that up.
Yeah, well, manufacturing, they basically identified in what area of the development phase was of best decision to start the process of manufacturing at risk. So once they had enough data, they expedited materials. Projects were done in the, you know, in different areas of manufacturing to be able to execute quickly. And then in the distribution side, it was basically a deployment strategy where the product was in the warehouse front facing, waiting, and with strict instructions and specific plans on how to get those to the distributors or the wholesalers. And then at the front end, at that, also each state needs licenses. So once you get that approval for emergency use, you can execute and take the product to the end distribution center.
Yeah.
And
So they started out, they planned for success. So they started the manufacturing process and developing it well before they knew if they had a successful product or not. That helped a lot of, provided a lot of time savings.
Yeah, so
And one thing,
essentially they took like a financial risk, right?
Big
Linda,
risk.
is what you were saying. Like, it could have been that they made this product and then they'd have to throw it away
Right.
if the trials didn't go well. But they said, you know, we can't do these things sequentially. We have a pandemic here. So they did a lot of things in parallel. Again, being very optimistic that all the test results would go well.
yeah, and the other thing in the manufacturing sites with the pandemic, they also had to put measures in place to keep the people there safe. Plexiglass, you know, PPEs, all of these things reduced risk. They had to reduce like the amount of people that could be in one facility at a certain time. And then so people had to work, for example, a crew worked from Wednesday to Sunday, another one came in Monday to you know, or Thursday to Sunday, Sunday to Wednesday. And it was also a lot of careful planning because, you know, imagine this, you have an SME that's there, very well trained, and you can only have them there half the time, right? So all of that had to be well thought out. The warehouse, you know, the vendors, they were closed down because they couldn't operate because they didn't have the measures in place. So there were a lot of challenges, inclusive. There was, and this is one of the sites where that were doing conversion, external site caught on fire. So where is the duplicity in the supply chain to make up for that? Where can we have, you know, like to like equipment and say, let's just go there and qualify it and run product. So those were some of the challenges that we had.
Right. Great. Drew, anything coming in through the chat that you're monitoring?
This is like a lot of conversations where folks actually know some things. They're recommending checking out the Pfizer COVID vaccine on Nat Geo.
Okay.
Yeah, but one of the things, I mean, just to start some questions, and just as as Rose said, drop your questions in the chat. One of the things I'm always challenged by when I worked in, for example, in the cable TV industry, we would always have to get hundreds of thousands of set-top boxes for our customers delivered, you know, at different places. So how do you manage risk in the supply chain, like from that manufacturing to the distribution? I mean, in the planning associated with getting, you know, for example, even with the COVID crisis, that large amount of vaccine out to, you know, I don't want to say consumers, to patients. What's the challenges, or some of the challenges that we're faced with big logistic challenges like that?
Jose, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would say number one, you have you have to think of the impossible risk, right? Any possible risk, even if it may not even be possible, right? You say it could be possible. Then you create mitigation plans, and then you measure those against, you know, are we going to invest financially, or are we going to lose out on this opportunity, right? So there's options, and then a decision is basically made. And being in supply chain so long, it's I have a saying. I say Murphy lives in supply chain. You will definitely run into problems for sure. You know, just another example: a manufacturer that may have not followed a procedure, right, or mislabeling, right? You can't throw product out with a mislabel. Another example, an Envirotainer having an issue with its refrigeration system, and then you have a temperature excursion. So you don't have data to say, can we save this, right? So you have a predetermined plan to say, if we lose product, what's next? So you build redundancies, you know, choice one and choice two, you make the decision, and then you say choice two is still there because we we need to have that. So that's all I can say is plan and have the unthinkable in writing, and use the subject matter experts. What if this happens? What can we do next? And if that fails, what do we do next, right? Until you get to where we can't do anything else and we lost out on the opportunity.
Got it. So we do have some questions flying in now, and One of the first ones here, Pfizer, Moderna were successful companies. How many companies manufactured at risk and were not approved? So I'm assuming there were some companies that probably went out on risk to manage to develop vaccines, and they may still be waiting for approval from the federal government or actually other governments around the world. Are you aware of any companies that went out on risk to do that? And I guess agencies to
I think
buy.
there's some, and maybe Linda can chime in too, that are still working on some. So there's
Right.
still vaccines coming, but I'm actually personally not aware of any that did not get approved.
Got it. Okay.
Not
Yeah,
that I'm necessarily a vaccine expert, but
I believe what's happened here is there were several companies in the run, right, that said that they have the potential to make the vaccine, and they went through the standard process, right, to get there. But then there's companies that couldn't justify that their product was safe or effective, and they decided, well, we're gonna stop this, and we're not gonna go anymore. But I don't know of
Yeah.
anyone that has launched and then they haven't been able to get approval or anything like that.
because like Jose said, often, and maybe Linda, you can chime in, if it's not going well in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3,
Right.
you stop. Like as
That's what happened, right? That happened with Merck. They were going at risk as well, and their clinical trials were not looking good. So they did pull out and stop. They didn't register with the FDA. They stopped before that stage, but they did take a risk and, gambled and lost some money by doing that.
Got it.
Yeah. And there were cases in the beginning. Remember, I don't know if you guys remember Operation Warp Speed, and there were certainly dollars coming from the U.S. government to help, speed some of this. It was like, okay, here's a million, billion,
Yeah.
like $1 billion to go set up this facility, develop these vaccines. So that the government was also involved in trying to speed this up.
Yeah, and that kind of is a good segue into one of the next questions where, I guess were there lessons learned from the COVID approach that could be used to lower overall drug costs of drug development because they get to market faster. So did we learn anything or any new laws that you're aware of that have been passed maybe to help bring drugs to market faster since the COVID crisis, or some learnings from the COVID crisis?
I mean, one thing I can just bring up, because I was just reading about it, was the American Rescue Act of 2021, I think just got passed in March. And essentially that's, again, US government funding in the billions of dollars to not only continue research and development in vaccines and therapeutics, but also, I think as part of the Defense Production Act, to be able to bring some of these things back to the US for domestic production. So yeah, I don't know if that directly answers the question, Drew, lessons learned, but I think there's still going to be a lot of work in development and of not only the vaccines, but the therapeutics, meaning like the medicines that can help reduce the severity of the disease. Right, Linda, you want to talk about that? I know you were saying you were working on products that were going to be for COVID-19 also.
So one of the trials that I'm working on right now as project management, it's looking at patients that are hospitalized with COVID on a ventilator, and they're seeing if they can decrease the amount of time the patient is on the ventilator by using their medicine. So that's the primary objective. That particular study, we did not get any assistance from the government through BARDA. We did apply for it, even though it was related to COVID and a treatment of COVID, we weren't granted any money for that. And that study right now is ongoing. Not sure if that answered your question, Rose.
Yeah, just to give some insight there.
Go
ahead, Drew.
All right, cool. So here's a question. How has COVID restrictions caused new adaptable approaches that you will now implement full-time moving forward. So I guess things that maybe we've learned from a project manager perspective in pharma that have helped do things a little bit better for next time, or lessons learned, like you referenced lessons learned earlier. But is there something specific you can cite that you will implement in upcoming projects, or you have stored away in lessons learned, and that was a great learning from this project or initiative that I can use in the future?
I can tell you something that is happening to me because of COVID and, the pandemic. So enrollment is very important in a clinical study. You have to enroll so many patients, right, to see if it's going to work. The study that I'm working on is in ICU patients with heart failure. So we got ready to start it in March of last year. So what happened in March of last year, right? All the ICUs were overwhelmed. There were so many COVID patients, they didn't even have enough beds. So that was, for us, that put a screeching halt to all of our enrollment. So we were supposed to be done enrolling this month. Now we're lucky if we'll be done by the end of September. And we're looking at all different mitigation strategies to put in place. What can we do to make up some of this time? That was a very special circumstance because of the pandemic. Some of the things we're looking at is we're looking at going to Israel to get some study sites there because they have a super high level percentage of COVID vaccination. So that's one of the, right now we're costing that out and seeing how much time that would take and how much money that would be. So I'd say that from that perspective, COVID was very, very unique. It was just like out of left field, the pandemic and the havoc it wreaked on enrollment for this study.
Yeah, I have some learnings too. They're called the Hulu lenses. They're special lenses you put on people that you can actually see what you're doing. It's like you're inside their eyes. And just to be quick, I had a schedule lined out for operators. I was moving the product from one site to another site. I had the schedule where the new operators are going to go get trained at the old site. The old operator is going to go over to the new site and do all this. So that the schedule was over like 6 months. With the use of Hulu lenses, we were able to do that in 3 weeks. Yep, 3 weeks.
Awesome.
Yeah, because we had to physically travel, right? So you have to go to the site and you make sure you don't interrupt their operations, commercial supply, then take those operators, fly them to another site, then they have to stay there for a week, and then they go back, and a couple weeks go by. In this case, we basically bought the equipment and we sat there, even myself included, watching the operator doing everything, and we were all going, oh, wait a second, the procedure or the experienced SME would go, oh, when that happens to me. So I think I'm going to really start using that technology much more efficiently.
That's a really good point. And just being able to be efficient virtually too, right? As project managers, I think we've learned that we can get a lot done.
Yeah. Oh,
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a translator like in each site. So the person, like I was as a Spanish translator. So I'm over here saying, okay, the mechanic is telling you this, and going over to the other guy saying, you're the mechanic saying that. So it was a lot of fun. It was much more, I mean, I could have never done that in a normal commercial site with a narcotic, right? You just can't go in there and help out. So it was good.
Yeah, so that's another improvement and something that you learned to be able to shorten the timeline. Yeah, Linda, were you going to comment on that too?
No, I was just agreeing with you said that being able to work virtually so much smarter and better as a result of the pandemic. That's huge.
Yeah.
Right, and given that, it's a good segue into this question here about cooperation between rival drug companies. Do you think that experience will change the competitive rules of engagement going forward between pharma companies?
Yeah, it sure seems to. I mean, I'll just comment on the fact that as I'm talking to, because our clients are at all of these global pharmas, they themselves are, I'd say, amazed because it wasn't the way it used to be at the partnership between the large global pharma companies, right? So I've talked to people, project managers in there, and they're just, feeling really good about how the partnering is happening. I mean, we know, what is it? The J&J vaccine is getting manufactured at the Merck vaccine plants. I mean, that's just one example of many. So I do think, and I'm hopeful that partnerships like that will continue as a result of this.
Got it. One, kind of bring the conversation back to project managers, because that's what we do. What opportunities are there for PMs or program managers to work within the life sciences if they really don't have any experience in this area? Are there any training or qualification or experience that would be helpful to this transition?
We're actually going to move into that, and I was just paying attention to the time since it's about 8 o'clock. We could move right into the careers discussion. Do you think that would be good, Drew?
That would be fine by me. So yeah, because I'm always interested in talking about jobs and opportunities and just how to matriculate through life as a PM.
Great.
Because
So,
when I grew up, when I was a kid, I wanted to grow up and be a PM. Now I'm actually a PM by accident.
okay.
It was
So
an accident about 15
we
years ago.
anticipated you were going to ask, or somebody was going to ask, if I've never worked as a PM in the life sciences before, how could I get into the industry? And I have a couple of tickler slides here, but then we'll generate the discussion again. So to transition into a career in life sciences PM, we like to say find a bridge, right? And so that bridge could look like a couple of different things. Here's a few examples. I know this is a little wordy, but information technology, life sciences bridge. So you could have worked as an IT PM at a pharma company, maybe supporting regulatory affairs applications, and then you could become a regulatory PM. So going from the technology side to the regulatory affairs, one way. The middle one is product development. If you're not in life sciences, maybe you worked in telecommunications or something like that, developing products. And then you get recognized for that product development expertise, and you understand things like stage gates. You could then transition into product development, project management at, say, a medical device company. We actually have somebody who actually did this on our team. And then the third one that I highlighted here was the PMP bridge. If you have certification, you have the PMP certification that is valued in life sciences also. It shows that you're serious about the profession of project management. And that's a way for you to be able to bridge industries. You can learn a little bit more about the industry. There are certificate programs, there's drug development courses, things like that. And you marry those together, and I think, you could potentially make that shift. But anyway, how about our panel? You guys want to talk about any kinds of transitions or suggestions for people that aren't in the industry?
I just want to say how important it is now to get your PMP certification. I was kind of grandfathered in because I've been in project management in pharma for so long. But right now I'm studying to get certified because right now I'm working for FlexPro, and I'm not at this company for, say, 20 years that knows my track record, right? So I'm going to have to do contracts with new clients pretty often. So I'm going to have to get certified. So I'm taking the exam this summer and studying for it now. So that's just want to put a plug in how important that is now to pharmaceutical companies.
Good plug, Linda. And you're studying with how many people? Because we have like
12. There's 12 in FlexPro that are taking the challenge at the same time.
Yeah. It's always easier to study with others if you can do it. But I did mine 4 years ago with a group of about 10 people, and it was so much easier than doing it yourself. But yeah, definitely do it. The clients at big pharma companies, especially, are asking for this certification. So, Jose.
Yeah, my take is I've crossed, out and into pharma and medical device, and my expertise, I'm a project manager. That's what I am. Okay, that's my core competency.
Practitioners.
Yep. And you rely on your SMEs, right? You're not gonna walk into a project in pharma and you won't know all of the acronyms, but they can be learned. You may not understand, that when you're moving a manufacturing site, all of the regulatory activities in all the countries for all the presentations and all the products, the things that have to happen, right? That area of where Rose talked about maintaining your status with the health authorities. So, but you will learn those because you will see how all the parts fit together. So you'll have a regulatory group, you'll have an engineering group, so your job is to take, right, that plan and those work streams and have them develop what they need to do to get from point A to B. And, sometimes it's probably easier going in on a smaller project, doing a piece of it, and then working your way to different pieces. I'm currently, the projects I'm on are pretty, I would say, in the supply chain aspect, covering a lot of those areas now, like end to end. So imagine a company like we kind of talked about it. Now they're collaborating, and I'm working with two companies, big pharma companies that are working on manufacturing a product for the other, right? And what we're doing is we're moving it out of the Janssen, or better said J&J area, and taking it to that other company and putting it into their preferred manufacturing site. And they have all these arrangements. So, that's happening, and you rely on all those experts. I mean, even transportation. When you think about moving a drug, there has to be established routes, right? You can't just say, send something from Germany to US directly. If it's an active ingredient that has some DEA implications as well, that you just can't do that, right? Because there's laws and other things. So you rely on them to do it. And then they will tell you when they're going to get everything done. And then you continue to confirm your schedule and manage the execution. And then where you really learn a lot is when you start in the area of control and you start monitoring and controlling it. That's because now you have the opportunity to see those things coming to fruition. And the lessons learned, very important. There's, some people call them retroactive, other people call them lessons learned. The important thing is continue to do those throughout the project. Don't wait until the end. Keep going through the stages, have your lessons learned, and you'll go through a couple cycles and you'll be able to expand it.
Yeah, and there are places that offer certifications. I think, Rose, in some of the next slides, you had those listed. Mm-hmm. I know that in Ambler, Temple offers a master's program in regulatory and drug development. But here are some of the other sources for getting information on learning drug development.
Yep, good segue, Linda. Yeah, there's certificate programs. You could even go to some of the trade organizations, BioNJ, there's Life Sciences Pennsylvania, I mentioned earlier. The one on the top here, diaglobal.org is, I think it used to be Drug Information Association before in the past. Mm-hmm. But there are project management communities of practice within DIA. You could learn a bit. The Food and Drug Administration I have over there on the right. You can go to fda.gov and you can study right from FDA. It's actually very readable. I was surprised. I went in there. It's very readable. The development, the drug development process, and showing you how the approvals are done. So there are resources like that. And then I'll just back up one slide here.
Yeah.
Other educational opportunities. I mean, there's many. These are just examples. You could go to online courses, things like that. Yeah.
I also highly suggest read the CFR 21. Pick an area of your interest. There's that the CFR is, and you can get it on the web, on the FDA website. So if you say, well, the project I'm interested in is, let's say, in doing serialization. Well, go to CFR and look for those things. And then you can also look for more resources and become a little bit more self-educated in that area, and then you can start there. So that's like a bridge. That's how, if I were to approach it today, I would probably pick a couple of these and go to the FDA website and pick an area where I'm not knowledgeable in or don't know anything about it and learn more about it.
Yeah, and there's information out there. Like, I was surprised years ago when I discovered this, like even clinicaltrials.gov, right, Linda, right? That's very readable. Like if people are interested in what's going on for COVID, or you have a family member that has a particular disease and you want to find out, right? Is that
It's
true?
very nice. Clinicaltrials.gov. So you have to register every clinical study that you're doing on there. And it talks about how you qualify to get in the study. And it's very, very user friendly and in layman terms. I agree. It's very helpful. And I'm sorry, my dog is starting to like bark. That's my dog. Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Drew, do you have other questions? Because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move to, yeah.
Somebody had a comment, and it was interesting. They said that they thought it might be easier to be a PM in pharma, an easier segue if you went in on new product launches. And that's kind of interesting because today we talked a lot about R&D, and I got in because of my science background. But that was an interesting point that I saw flash up, because the new product launches, you don't necessarily need the science background, and you could perhaps use more of your PM skills, more transferable, easier.
Yeah, I think a lot of the questions were actually focused around opportunities to get training or learn more about the pharma industry. There's some, even folks are putting links into some universities, and they're talking about the information that you had in your slide there.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it too. I mean, if you're interested in a large global pharma company, I mean, there are so many things needed there, right? I mean, your backgrounds in business or accounting or marketing, sales, you don't have to be scientists and engineers like a lot of us are to really work in that industry. And once you get in, then you can make your way to these other areas.
And where you want to be, right?
Yeah, just a quick note. I mean, in IT, I've always found opportunities in many places in IT. So that's a good bridge as well. I work in banking now, but I have nothing to do with any banking information. I work in a corporate technology group, and a lot of things there are universal. Everyone has to use a laptop or a computer, right? So there's a lot of systems that support that.
And there's a lot of technology around things like clinical trials, supply chain, right? So that could be a way to be on the technology side, and then you learn the process steps for the subject matter while you're, implementing software or something like that.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so I think we're almost at 8:15. I want to be mindful of time and just thank everybody for participating. We're going to hang out for some breakout rooms if